So a lot of people has been talking about the Brexit and where Britain lies within Brexit. And, I've heard a lot of people giving their own opinions as to, whether, Britain should stay in the European Union or whether Britain should leave the European Union. Now, I'm going to try and be as brief as I can. This is a major complicated topic, and I'm going to try and break it down as small as I can. This video, I must warn you in advance, is going to be long. So go get your coffee, your tea, your biscuits or whatever, because this is going to be a long video. But I'll try and break it down for as short as I can. Now, let me start off by saying that I've heard a lot of people giving their opinions on Brexit, especially my American brothers and sisters. And I don't mind. I've got lots of family over there in the United States. Lovely country. I've been there so many times. I'm familiar with quite a few of the states over there in the United States. So, I'm understandable of it. A lot of my family, serve in the military, and they've bled and died for that country and for the democracy of that country, for the red, white and blue, for the stars and stripes. But even saying that, it still doesn't give me the right to comment publicly on matters that doesn't affect me or impact my life in terms of your local or national policies. For instance, America has voted for, politicians, senators and presidents over the years. Not all of them we all agree with from the international community. But because we don't live, work or grew up or born in the United States, we're not a citizen there, we don't have a say in the political argument. We don't have a say in your future, your political future goes, so to speak. So we keep silent. But I do have those discussions with my friends and families behind closed doors, but that's as far as it goes. Now, for me, the reason why I'm mentioning all this is because we have a situation now where a lot of celebrities especially are now starting to voice their opinion about Brexit. And this becomes a serious issue because, as you know, the United States is one of the most influential countries in the world. Whether we all want to agree with that or not, that's the facts. It is what it is. When it comes to Hollywood and fashion and all that, everybody look to the American market. Let me just say that again. American culture, does sweep across the planet, and a lot of people sort of look at the American culture and model and try to emulate it in many ways. It's not perfect, but they emulate it in many ways, and that's understandable. It's even over here in Europe and in United Kingdom. A lot of the fashion and the sort of swag, if you like, is being copied in some regards. So Hollywood plays a major part in that. And the Hollywood movies and blockbusters and all of that. So no one is going to deny that. But let's just get down to this. When celebrities starting to go on their platform and, they say things like F Brexit and, why are the British people so stupid to join, to want to leave the European Union? They're so stupid. They're not smart. They're not intelligent. Those people who are saying that, those celebrities, you're influencers and you've got a massive platform. You need to be more responsible. You can't be irresponsible of making political statements without living or understanding the culture and how it impacts us here in Britain. And this is why I've done this video. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean there aren't those Americans who maybe have friends and families over in Europe and they have concerns. As I said, I've just mentioned that I've got friends and families over in the United States who some of them has bled and died for that country. So, but it still doesn't give me the right to have a say in terms of what goes on there. When you vote for someone, we don't always agree with it, but you're the ones that's in the driving seat. You're the citizen, so you have the ultimate decision to vote. The only time I'll voice my opinion publicly about something to do with the United States in terms of its politics per se is when it comes to the foreign policies. And this is not just unique to America, it's unique to any country in the world. When their foreign policy affects us in the United Kingdom, then I'll have something to say, because then that's crossing borders and that's impacting us here in Europe or in the United Kingdom. And that's a separate issue. Now, getting back to, what's going on with Brexit, there's a few things we need to say. A lot of stuff I'm going to bring up, as I say, is going to be a long video. Some of the stuff I'm going to bring up is going to be, you're going to know about it already. But I'm quite sure there's a lot of stuff I'm going to bring up, which a lot of my American brothers and sisters and other people throughout the international community don't know, probably don't care to know. And I'm going to attack things from, I shouldn't use the word attack, but I'm going to break things down from various angles, which I'm sure a lot of you aren't even contemplating, not even contemplating. But I'm going to break it down and open your eyes, so strap in, because this is going to be an interesting video. So first things first, let's just take, the situation with the UK. Now, the UK first tried to join the European Union back in 1963 when they first applied, and it was rejected. UK tried again in 1967, and it was again rejected. Why was it rejected, and how was it rejected? Well, let's answer the how first. It was rejected by the then president of France, President Charles de Gaulle. Those people in France like to pronounce CH as SH. So rather than saying Charles, they say Charles. So, but I speak English. My French isn't very good. So I'm going to say Charles de Gaulle without being disrespectful to the French people, and their history and so on and their heritage. So the then President Charles de Gaulle vetoed Britain when they applied in 1963, and again he vetoed in 1967, blocking the UK from joining the European Union. Now, Charles de Gaulle presidency ended in 1969, and when it ended in 1969, Britain saw the opportunity to then apply for a third time to join the European Union. And when they did, they were successful because obviously Charles de Gaulle wasn't around to veto them anymore and block him. But then again, all the other sort of, countries, European countries within the member states, they didn't block, Britain either. So it seems as if the then French president was the one who, did the blocking. And I'm going to go into some of the banter and some of the history as to why this may or may not be the case going forward. But in any event, after Britain was successful on the third attempt after 1969 when Charles de Gaulle presidency ended, Britain formally and officially joined the EU in 1973. So that's a very important milestone in terms of, British history. Now, the next immediate question you would ask, well, I would ask anyway, is why did Britain, want to join the European Union? Why did they want to join the EU? Well, according to the reports and the research I've done, it's because Britain's economy at the time was in decline, and they sought to join the EU as a way to, sort of bolster and increase the economy and make it perform better. In other words, they thought by joining the EU, the grass would be greener on the other side, and it would be beneficial to Britain to join. I mean, who would want to join an enterprise or any project or any sort of organization where you're worse off inside of it than you were when you were outside of it? So that was the kind of thinking going forward from the British government back then. Now, once Britain joined, the best way to describe this to you is like a rapper that goes into a 360 deal. Britain realized after a few years that, this deal isn't working out according to plan and the grass isn't as green on the other side as they thought. And the reason why I use the rapper scenario is because imagine you have a rapper, and this is just for the layman terms to break it down, because now everybody is onto this, political or whatever other level. Some people just like the plain English, which is the best way to explain anything, really. The technical jargon is not the way to go. You just confuse people, they lose interest, and quite frankly, they look at you like you're stupid, even though you might make perfect sense. So that's just the facts of it. So having said that, let me just jump forward into this. If you hear me swallow and gulp every now and again, it's because, I'm drinking some water and so on as I go along. Now, so imagine a rapper who is an underground rapper. He's not been discovered yet. He's, taking his time to sort of, come up the ranks, and he wants to blow up. But he's very eager. He's eager to blow up. He wants to be signed by a massive record label, so he can blow up and be put on, and then he can start making the bag. But then eventually he got signed to this, major record label. And then after he signed to the record label, after a few months or whatever, or years maybe, he realized that he signed a 360 deal. Now he wants to come out of the deal, but he can't. He's stuck because he didn't get his solicitors or lawyers to read the fine print and realize that he was signing a 360 deal. So now that he's stuck, he's kicking and screaming and complaining about the record company, how they're evil and this, that, and the third. But at the end of the day, the record company is like, well, we're not letting you out of the contract because the contract suits us very fine. And maybe the rapper might say, oh, we want you to renegotiate the contract. And the record label is like, we don't want to renegotiate the contract either, because as it stands, we own your publishing, we own your masters, we own everything. So we have you by the balls, basically. So why should we relinquish that and give you any chance? You should have, got your lawyer to look over the paperwork before you sign. So that's kind of the best scenario in terms of layman terms I can give you as to the situation with Britain. Britain was in a decline, that the rapper, undiscovered and looking for a way out. Britain's economy was in a decline. So they sought to join the European Union to increase and get the bag and be put on and to blow up. But then once they got signed by the European Union, they realized that this is a 360 deal, and they were worse off in the deal than they were out. And as a reason, now they're kicking and screaming they want to get out. But then, Europe, being the European Union, don't want to relinquish them and get them out, because they're like, well, we got you right where we want you. Why should we release you when you're contributing so much, even though you're getting so little in return? And we're going to jump into that straight away. And I will also get into the background of this as to one possible reason why Charles de Gaulle, the president back then, who ended his presidency in 1969, why he possibly vetoed Britain twice. And that's another thing I didn't cover, so let me just cover that quickly. The report that I've done, the research I've done rather, comes back saying that the reason why Charles de Gaulle vetoed and blocked Britain from joining the EU twice in 63 and 67 is because he felt that the British economy and the British agricultural practices was not compatible and in line with the rest of mainland Europe or the European Union. So therefore, those are the reasons he gave to block it, whether that's true or not, but that's what my research turned up. So that's the situation. But you have to bear in mind that Europe and Britain, they're not really close friends, even though they're close neighbours. It's one of those situations where there's a bit of banter going on. They've been sticking it and needling it to each other at every opportunity they get. It's just what it is. There's a history in Europe. I mean, there was World War I and World War II fought. So this country got some history and some issues, deep-seated issues. Okay, 2019, they've learned to get along and tolerate each other and work and respect each other. But those deep-seated issues are there. You only have to pick up a history book. They're all teaching their respective history of what they've done to each other and what each other have done to them and so on and so forth. Not only that, you have to look at colonialism as well and how that gets into the mix. And slavery and all of that is part of it. And you might say, well, what is all of this got to do with Brexit? But I'll explain that to you. But before I explain that to you, let me just jump into some figures first, because that's what we want to tackle first. I want to tackle this on about 3 or 4, maybe 5 different fronts or angles to give you the sort of, the full picture, if you like. Because let's face it, we do have, and I'll say this before I jump in, we do have right-wing racist elements who are promoting and pushing for Britain to leave the European Union, Brexit, because remember when the vote was, when the referendum was put, or referendum rather, was put to Britain, the people voted some 49 to 51% in favour of leaving the European Union. Hence, we have Brexit. So with that, we do have a right-wing racist element who's running around the world, and they're saying, Brexit, we should leave Brexit. And, people from all around the world, including our American brothers and sisters, are looking at these right-wing bigots, basically, and saying, well, they're not making Britain look good. It's embarrassing. These are the people that's trumpeting your cause for Brexit. They don't look particularly good. The same way in some countries, they're not particularly proud of their current president. And it's like, the cause that the president is trumpeting is not particularly making those particular countries look anyway, without me calling any names. I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. It's quite obvious. But, I'm just trying to keep it real, so to speak. So that's that situation. So I do understand that racist bigotry element that's pushing the bandwagon. And they're there for a reason, because it just so happened that things is in line with what they want to do, so they put their own spin on it. But let's just jump into the figures first of all and just take it from there, because that's the way I'm addressing everything, not from a racial point of view. I'm an African person from African heritage, my parents are Caribbean and British and so on. So I understand things from an African heritage point of view, just so anyone who have any doubt. So having said that, let's just jump into this chart. I've done 2 charts. Now, as you can see, it's the chart is arranged in alphabetical order from Austria all the way down to the UK. Now, this is not the best way to represent this chart in terms of what we want to look at, in terms of the analytics. The best way to arrange this chart is to let me rearrange this in terms of from smallest to largest, or from largest to smallest, if you like. Now, what this is showing you is all the 28 member states that's in the countries rather. They're the member states that's in the European Union, and this shows you what they contribute or give to the European Union per person, and as you can see, measured per person there, and what each person in these respective countries get back in return or receive. So as you can see, Britain is second to last here, with Netherlands at last. And this is because it's in regards to which country is the worse off overall in terms of, give and take. So Netherlands is down there with, they per person on average. So each person on average in the Netherlands gives 236 euros and they get back in return, whether it's revenue or a mixture of revenue and refund, of 123 euros. But if you look at the UK, which is here, you can see we get 180. We contribute 180. We give to the EU per person on average. And we get back 105. That's not very good. That's very bad odds. But this is per person. So just bear that in mind. So countries like up here, like Lithuania and Luxembourg. Luxembourg is here. But if we rearrange this another way, where we can see which country received the most and which country received the least out of the EU, regardless of how much they contribute. Once we do that, we have a different situation. We now see that Luxembourg is at the top. So in other words, Luxembourg contribute the most to the EU. This is in euros, by the way, not pounds or dollars. So Luxembourg, give to the EU per person on average 544 euros. Whereas per person on average, they're getting back 3,000 euros. That's a good return on their money per person. That's not per population. So let's say Luxembourg have 100 million. You multiply these numbers by 100 million to see how much as the country is getting. So as you can see, Luxembourg green farm performs the red, because the red is what they give and the green is what they receive. And this is what you want to see when you look at a chart like this. You want to see a scenario where the greens far outstretch the reds. So for all these countries here, like Belgium, Luxembourg, Greece, Lithuania, Hungary, and so on and so forth, they're doing quite well. But look at Britain. Britain is all the way down here at the bottom. We're at the bottom of the pile down here, with 105 euros per person on average that we get. That's dismal. Now, if that's not a reason itself, for me, that would be a reason to want to vote to leave Brexit. So that to me is not stupid and ignorant. That's like the facts are speaking for themselves. Figures don't lie. Now, I am not based in my Brexit strategy. I'm not really for or against Brexit per se, but for the sake of the video, if I'm going to once I go through all these points, I'll tell you my opinion as to whether we should stay or whether we should leave. And based on that information, and purely on that information, I'll tell you whether, in my opinion, we should leave we should leave the European Union or we should stay in terms of Brexit. So when I'm looking at this chart and I see where Britain lies, I'm thinking, well, if someone comes to me and give me this chart and I see us here, I want to, if this was a product on the stock market, I want to invest in it. If I know that I'm going to put in 180 euros and I'm going to get a return of 105, which means a 41% deficit, I'm not going to invest in that product at all. I'll be stupid to do that. And this is per person, okay? So that's what you have to bear in mind. Now, if you look at it in terms of, who gives the most and so on, of course, again, you'll see Luxembourg at the top. But it's good if you give the most and you get the most, fine, fair enough. But Luxembourg is not one of the top economies in the in European Union. So if you look where Britain is somewhere almost in the middle there. But, then these are the countries that contribute the least. So Bulgaria, Romania, Latvia, Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, Estonia. These are the poorer countries or the weaker economies, if you like. So they contribute less, but then they're getting good returns though. So it's working out fine for them. So as long as you're getting more, you're in the green or you're in the black, as they say in accounting or finance, then you're fine. But if you start to go into the red, then, it means something's wrong somewhere. It's not working out for you. That's just plain mathematics. The figures don't lie. So that's the situation there. Now, would these countries here, so let me do this again by in terms of who's giving the most and who's getting the least and so on. So country like Luxembourg would voice their opinion, wouldn't want Britain to leave the EU. Why would they? Because they're benefiting so much. Because what you have, when I arrange it back this way again, these countries here are the ones that is suffering the most. In other words, they're bearing the brunt for these countries to benefit. These countries are among, not all of them, but they're among the ones that are either heavily in recession or the poorer economy countries. So basically, these countries here are taking one for the team. They've got the stronger economy. So, and the strongest of them all is like France, Germany, UK, Sweden, they're there. Those are the main ones, in my opinion, that is really getting the most or in terms of the economy as an economy. They're the strongest economy in the European Union or in Europe as a whole. But they're taking for the team. And I can understand the argument saying, well, you're the richer economy. So if you're the richer countries, you should take a loss and contribute more so that the poorer countries can get a way to come up. And there's nothing wrong with that if initially that's the case for the first, in the medium or in the short term. But over the long term, no country can sustain this. Over the long term, there's going to be a point where you're going to have to say, listen, we can do this, but after so many years, we can't stay on this trajectory. We need to change trajectory. We need to come off of this 360 because we're just in deficit and we're owing all the time. We're losing. We're not winning. So even if you're losing all the time, just to take one for the team, you can only do that for so long. Eventually, they have to pull their weight too to balance it out. You can't have these people pulling their weight all the time and they're not, just because they're richer. It's the same argument I'll give to someone who's a rich person and a person who's poor or middle class. Yes, the poor should, contribute more to the society. But if you look over the long term, if the rich is starting to lose considerable amount of money for a considerably long time, they're going to start to voice concerns. They're going to start saying, well, what is the policies to increase the chances of the working class or other people to become entrepreneurs, to make more money so that they can contribute? And if that's not in place, this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And eventually they'll come out one by one, and then it's a house of cards. The whole thing falls down. But, this is per person, as I say. And these figures that I take from, official websites, there's figures from many, many websites, but they're not official. And so I don't want to rely on those figures. I go to the official European Union and I go to the UK government's website to get these figures because, they're published there. They're public knowledge. Well, it's supposed to be public knowledge, but we'll find out in a minute that not all the information that is required, that I sought, was readily available or publicly available. So here we are now. I did mention to you that Britain joined the European Union in 1973. But as you can see, from 1973 all the way to 1999, there's no data. And you might think, no, why is that? Because there's simply none. I mean, I really did try to uncover this data. I couldn't find anything on any of the websites. And as I say, the sources I'm getting my information from is here. So as you can see, you have the European Commission, and that's the official website. And then you have the Office of National Statistics, which is the UK government's website. Yeah. So between the EU and the UK government website, I couldn't find any statistics to fill in here, figures to fill in here. Otherwise, I would have plugged the figures in, like how much we've contributed, what refunds they've given us, if any, what revenue we had. And then with that information, I could calculate net contributions and net profit or net loss. But there's no figures for that, so that's why it's blank. Okay, I did try. I suppose I could have paid and get the information if I paid a few money over, but why should I? This is a YouTube video. It's not like I'm doing this for some corporation that's paying me to do it. And two, this should be public knowledge. As a member of the public, this should be public information, same like this is. I shouldn't have to pay to try and get this information. The archives should be so easily researchable that I can search and get this information. But anyway, I digress enough. I'll move on. But from 2000 onwards, as you can see, I do have figures from these official websites that I've quoted down here. So with those figures, this is what I've got. But then if you notice in terms of refund, so let me just scroll this up to there. Yeah, but in terms of refund from 2000 onwards, as you can see, there is no refund figure. Again, I did try and there was no data. There was no figures. So I can't make figures up and plug figures in which I don't have. So I had to leave it blank and just say 0. Now I can make my estimates, but that wouldn't be accurate. So that's why I left it blank. Okay, so the other thing to bear in mind now is that from 2010 here all the way to 2017, we have full figures. In other words, I have figures for what we contributed as a country. Now, this is not per person. This is the UK as a country, the whole United Kingdom, what they've contributed, Britain. So what we have is how much we've contributed in 2010, what refund we got, what revenue we earned, and obviously what our net contributions are, which is worked out from this figures, and what our net loss or profit was. And as you can see, we've never ever, made any we've never been in the green. We've always been in a deficit. We're always losing, and it's in the billions. It's not like it's a few 100,000 or millions. It's in the billions, as you can see. It's crazy. So let's just jump down to here from 2010. So the thing that I've noticed here straight away is that it's very volatile. I mean, in 2010, you got 15,000 that we contributed. And then in 2011, it went down to 9, which is okay, 9.6 billion as opposed to 15.1 billion. But then it jumps up to 10 billion. But then if you look at, say, I don't know, let's look at 2015 to 2016. In 2015, we contributed 11.9 billion into the EU. But by 2016, according to the figures of research, it's 18.9 billion. That's a big jump. So you can see how volatile it is. It's almost like Bitcoin. 1 minute is $50, then $200, then all of a sudden $900 and something dollars. And then, we know that in terms of the financial sector, stocks and shares and stuff, they do fluctuate, with economic climates and so on. We know that. But this is very volatile. These are big fluctuations. No country or prudent prime minister or president can plan a country's budget in this way when you don't know from one day to the next what you're going to do. Because remember, the European Union budget is set on an annual basis, so every year it changes. It's not the same thing every year. So what you have is you can't plan anything if you don't know that, okay, in this year you might pay 9 million, but in 2-3 years time you might have to, or 4 years time you might have to pay 18.9 billion, and then the following year it might be 13 billion, and then whatever. So it's crazy. But you can look at the refunds we get. The refunds are relatively within 3 to 5,000. 3 to 5 billion. And if you look at the revenue, it's the same thing. The revenue is really between, even if we're going to go all the way up here, it's between 1.6 or 1 point something billion to, the maximum is 4 billion or 3.3 billion or 3.7 or something billion. So the averages seem to remain relatively within a certain ballpark, and so is the revenue. But in terms of what we contribute, seems to heavily fluctuate, and therein lies the problem. But you can see, regardless of whether we got a refund or not, or whatever our circumstances is, we've always been in the red. Now, I could easily jump up here and say, maybe, if we had a refund of, say, I don't know, 8 billion, then we could be in the red. If you see the charts jumped over here, which I'll show you in a second. So now we get 1.8 billion. But then we're making 1.8 billion only because I type in a refund. There's no way the European Union is going to refund you more money than you put in. If you put in 7.8 billion, then I'm going to give you back 8 billion. That doesn't make sense. So even if this was some, 2 billion or something. So let's say, that's 2 billion. Yeah, let's say that's the figure for 2 billion. We would have to have a revenue here of the equivalent of, we would have to basically make like 6 or 8, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, we could make like 6 billion or 6 point something billion over here in order for us to go into the green. So as I said to you before, if I put here, I don't know, let's say we put 6 billion over here or something, 6.5 billion, let's say. What would that do? Right. So 6.5 billion, that will give us, this will give us this figure of 643 million. So we'll get 643 million in terms of, our profit. But then, that's shy of some, that's shy of a billion. So we don't even make a billion back, but we're putting billions in. But we don't even get a billion back, but we're still some kind of profit in the green. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So let me just undo that and bring that back to how it was with the natural figures that I've gotten. So this is the situation. So let's move on now and look down here. So further down here, you'll see that, between 2018, because obviously now that we're fighting to come out, the last bill we paid was in 2017, which was 13 billion. We got a refund of 5.6 billion, and we made a revenue of 4 billion. But then we're still in the red. We're still 3.4 billion in the hole. So we've never benefited, even with these massive, refund of 5.6 billion and a revenue of 4 billion. But if you're putting in 13 billion, you're still going to be in the hole basically. Where do I get these figures from? Because you notice these figures are all the same. you'll also notice that there's no refund and there's no revenue. Obviously, there wouldn't be anything for 2020, and there wouldn't be anything for 2019 either, because the year isn't ended yet. But there's nothing for 2018, which is past and gone already. Well, I'll put this down to the fact that, Britain is in the middle of a negotiations at the moment, and, back and forth with the European Union to decide how much, if anything, we pay coming out. Now, this is why I've got this bit down here in red where it says the UK to pay the EU Brexit bill estimated between 35 billion and 39 billion. And that's to cover, from 2018 to 2020. So what I did is I take this figure and averaged over 3 years and came up with 11.6 billion. So this 11.6 billion that we're looking at is averaged over 3 years, because we don't know, this is just a spectrum between 35 and 39. We don't know whether it's going to be 36 point something, 30, 38, 37, whatever. We don't know. So I'm just averaging it out. But regardless of what the situation is, we're not going to get a refund because it's an exit bill, and we're not going to make any revenue either. So whatever this figure is going to be, I'm just using this as average, as a filler based on these figures down here, and we average it over the time period. But even if we did that, we know that we're going to be in a hole. So, whatever the amount is going to be here in real terms, that's what we're going to end up with here, unless the EU decide to give us some refunds. And I don't see that happening, because if you follow the news in Europe, they've been giving us a fight and sticking it to us, and they're playing hardball. It's a lot of vindictiveness is going on, and political rivalry and so on. So that's what that is. And for those who would like to look at the chart, you can see that's what it looks like. It's crazy. I mean, when you look at stuff like this, why would you want to, and I'll put a key here again for you so you can see, in terms of profit and loss, net contributions, revenue, refund and contributions, and a whole also sort of gross contributions, if you like. So, when you look at all of this, you're thinking to yourself, well, this is crazy. Another thing I want to draw your attention to, if you notice, there is no data, prior to 2000. So 1999 going all the way back to 1973, there's no data. So because of that, I don't include it in the chart. It's pointless. So you can see from 1999 all the way to 1973, there's no data, because as I said to you, I did try and the data was just not there and I couldn't get it. So I don't, you could go in, you can click on it and go into the maps and add the information, but I took it out because I'm thinking, what's the point? If I did, what will happen is from 1973 all the way until 1999, you'll just have a flat line. Okay, you just have a flat line. Everything would be flat. All of these, just like how you see the green and the red here, is following the same trajectory. Same thing with the white and the green following the same trajectory. From 1973 to 1999, you'll just see one line. Everything would follow that one line because it's 0, 0, 0 all across the board. And then when it reaches 2000, then you start to see this. So that's just a waste of space for the graph. So I don't include it at all. So this graph is accurate to the reflection of the data that I have. But then, as I say, I don't have information for here. If I did, the graph would change accordingly. But what I'm saying is, looking at this information again purely from a mathematical or a figures point of view, financially, economically, whatever you want to class it as, this is not good for Britain. No one will no one will invest in an enterprise where your balance sheet looks like this. This is madness. No government can run a country looking like this. And I'm not saying this isn't the case, because every country, most countries on the planet, not all, but most countries on the planet, I would probably say 95% of countries on the planet, their balance sheet do look like this. They owe money at some stage or form. They owe debt. The world is being run under debt. If the debtors start calling in, if the creditors, start calling in their debts, then, a lot of economies and a lot of countries' economies will crash. It's just what it is. So it's just debt spiraling out of debt spiraling. But, where you can avoid a situation, they should get out, because the figures is telling you quite well. Now, I'll get back to this in more detail when I look at the map. But as you can see, the countries that's benefiting, like all these countries up here, they would say, no, Britain should stay in the EU. These are the countries that's going to run around the world and tell our American brothers and sisters and everybody else they can find that, Britain is stupid. Why they leaving the EU? They're stupid to leave. They're not smart. They should stay in. But then that's how their balance sheet looks. It doesn't look like this. And we could argue that, well, you're not, Britain ain't the only one. Austria is there. France and Denmark, Finland, Italy and Germany and Sweden and all these other countries is there. So, what makes Britain so special? Why is it so difficult? Why can't you stay and take the loss? After all, your economy is richer than these guys up here. So the strong should help the weak, and etc. etc. But then for how long will the countries with a stronger economy help the weaker countries? It's not sustainable over a long period. It's sustainable maybe short, medium term, but not over a long term. And the citizens are going to be in an uproar once they realize that there's no jobs, there's no career prospects for them, and then they look at where the money is going, but yet still there's no money for roads and schools and hospitals, and you know what I mean? It becomes a problem for the government. It becomes a headache. This is why once the referendum, as some people pronounce it, was given to the British public, and some 51% in favour voted to leave the European Union. The then Prime Minister, I forgot his name, he resigned. He bailed. He did a runner, as they say. And the reason why he did that is because he knew what was going to happen next. And he knew Europe would not forgive him. He knew that Europe will actually be coming in, kicking and screaming and doing whatever they can to spite and to be vindictive. So that's why he ran, and he turned over the reins to Theresa May. And I knew she wasn't going to do anything either. My suspicion was she was going to keep up the same facade for as long as she can and delay it as long as she could. But eventually she would bail out as well. I'm amazed she stayed in as long as she did. But I was looking for her to bail out last year or even the year, but whatever. But she stayed in, and now she's bailing out and turning over the reins to someone else. And I can predict to you and tell you now, the person that's coming in, they won't be able to do much. They did try to try and do a new referendum to try and, but that didn't work. So now it's delaying tactics. And then you have the European Union and Europe basically sticking it to Britain. And as you say, all of these countries, they have issues and they have history with each other. They might be neighbors, but they don't get along. They just learned in modern times in 2019 and so for the past decade or so, they've learned to tolerate each other and have respect for each other and get along and trade and work and do business with each other. But they have deep-seated issues in terms of their history. They've gone through 2 world wars. They've been fighting each other, like wolves over colonialism and slavery. And this is what I'm going to jump into next. So just to put an underline under what we've done so far, in terms of the figures that I've gone through here, this will alone tell me that Britain should leave Brexit, because it's never benefited us, and I don't see any indication according to these figures where we're going to even benefit. So why would you stay in something that's losing your money and pouring money down the drain? You go to any millionaire or billionaire or rich businessman and give him this business model and tell him to invest in it, and and see if he will give you the time of day. He'll probably get his bodyguards to throw you out on your ears or throw you out on your ass. He won't entertain you if you're coming to him with these kind of figures. It's like the Dragon's Den. I'm not investing. You're out. You know what I mean? So that's that situation. So let's now jump back into this map, because the next thing, so that's that first step. That's so one so far why I feel, in my opinion, Britain should go, because of the figures. It's not based on anything else. But as I say, for the racists and the right wing, it just so happened that these figures work in their favor, so they will use that. But I'm just looking at the facts and the history and the complexity of stuff. So let's move on to the next thing. Right, so the next problem we have is, remember that all these countries have history. There was a time when Portugal and Spain used to literally run the entire planet. They were the superpowers before the United States and anyone else. They were the 2 superpowers. So Portugal used to colonize a lot of African countries. So did France. They colonized a lot of African countries, while Spain colonized most of United States, Central America, South America, and so on. So what happened was not so much, the United States. They controlled more Central America and South America, as well as some of the Caribbean islands and so on. So that's where Spain came in. But what happened is Britain then got into the action once they saw what these two superpowers were fighting each other for spoils of war. Britain got into the action, and what Britain did is Britain had the United States. They got that. They had Canada. And then what Britain did is they went down there and they grabbed Jamaica at one point. Because remember, Spain had not only Cuba as one of their colonized islands, they also had Jamaica. But what happened is, if you go into the history, a lot of people don't probably know this, Spain was the country that was colonizing Cuba and Jamaica. But what happened is, in comes Britain fighting that colonial, war and spoils of war. So they basically fought the Spanish, drove them out of Jamaica and took Jamaica for their own spoils of war. So that's how we end up speaking English as opposed to Spanish. But if you zoom into Jamaica, we actually have something called Spanish Town. Let me see if I can find that for you. Spanish Town. How come that's a major city? How come it's not showing up on this map? What's Google playing at? Oh, there it is. Spanish Town. So Spanish Town is still got relics and traditions and culture of, remnants of the Spanish colonial times. But obviously that's completely whitewashed over with when the British came in and drove the Spanish out and took it over for themselves. But they didn't do it with Cuba. So that's why Cuba remains, Spanish speaking with all the Spanish names. And we can say the same thing for, Central America. It was once ruled and colonized by Spain, and so was the entire flipping Brazil, and some countries down in South America speak Portuguese, I believe, which is where the Portugal comes in. So you get to understand, even if you go up here in the United States, you got a lot of Spanish countries or Spanish names like Las Vegas and San Jose, because in Spain you don't pronounce the J's, it's Jose as opposed to Jose or Jose. So San Jose, Las Vegas, California, San Francisco, Nevada, those are Spanish names. New Mexico, El Paso, typical Spanish name. Sonora, not sure about Tuscan, San Diego, those are Spanish names that's in America. So a lot of these names suggest to me that they were probably once part of Mexico, but then, as the United States widened and increased the amount of states they had, they took over some of these Mexican territories and sort of included them into their part of the United States. So that's what that is. Even countries like Oklahoma sound Spanish to me. Alabama sounds Spanish. Georgia sounds Spanish too. Orlando sounds Spanish. Orlando, yeah, that sounds Spanish. Florida could sound Spanish. So it's amazing. San Antonio, that's Spanish. We did mention, like El Paso and so on. But I don't want to digress anymore. But the reason why I'm mentioning that to you, because you might say, well, how does that tie into Brexit? And what's that got to do with Europe and Brexit? I'm giving you this background because I'm about to tell you, open your eyes from another angle. And that angle is, these countries been fighting each other and fighting over the spoils of war from before World War I and II, from back in colonial times. So did the British. They were fighting the Spanish as well. So did France. France was in there too, doing their bit. They've got some Spanish speaking and Portuguese speaking countries, second languages down here in Africa. So these countries here have been very busy and very active with their colonialism. And then, as I say, you got World War I and II, where all these countries were fighting with each other. France got beef with Britain. Britain got beef with France, Spain, Portugal. They all got beef with each other. Poland. If you look at Germany, there used to be East and West Germany at one point, where the Berlin is. You used to have the Berlin Wall, and when the Berlin Wall came down, East and West Germany was unified, and now you have Germany. So there you have it. Then you have Poland. When you look at the Jews from East Germany and Poland and so on, and them being, airlifted and, relocated over in Palestine. That's not a completely different issue, but it just gives you an idea of what really is. And I know the typical American, they ain't really doing the research like this. They I don't know what they're teaching them in schools over there. And the American education is good. I'm not knocking it in any way, but then the onus is on the individual to learn more. Learning African history is good, but learning European history is, to me, imperative, because the European history tells you a story of why Africa became how it is and why it's in the position it's in now. And once you understand the history of these people and how they operate, you can safeguard your country so that history don't repeat itself. But anyway, moving on. So, again, the situation between Ukraine and Russia and so on and so forth, it's all there. Turkey at one point wanted to join the European Union, but they're constantly being rejected because they don't, they don't satisfy the criteria that's laid down by the European Union to join. But as you can see, Turkey is not really part of the European Union. They're just sort of they're in a very strategic location between Europe and sort of the Middle East. So just bear that in mind. But they're not part of the European Union. And you probably think, what's it got to do with Brexit and Britain over here? Well, let me tell you. Okay, let me zoom in on this country right here. We've got Switzerland over here, and we've got Sweden up there. Norway is not part of the European Union as far as I understand it. Let me just double check quickly. Let me just arrange this in alphabetical order. N for Norway. No, Norway is not there. Netherlands is there, but not Norway. So Norway is not part of the European Union, but Sweden is. Finland is. Poland is. Lithuania is. Germany is. France is. Portugal and Spain is. Italy is. And obviously the United Kingdom along with Ireland. So even Ireland and the UK, they have history as well. Some people might not know. The Irish don't like the English. The English don't like the Irish. The Welsh and the Scottish don't like the English. It's history. When you understand the history, you understand what's going on. So even if Britain wants to come out of the European Union, the Irish might say, well, we don't want to come out, we want to stay. Because their economy over here is not the same economy as on mainland Britain, if you like. So, everybody got their different agenda and spin that what they want to pursue. So the reason why I'm saying all this, let's go back over here to Switzerland. Switzerland is not a part of the European Union, but they're part of what is called the EEA, which is the European Economic Area. You also have the EEC, which is the European Economic Community. Now, you could argue that Switzerland is part of the European Economic Community as well as part of the European Economic Area, but they're not a member of the EU, the European Union. Now, why is this important, you ask, and why did you go through all this history and back and forth and so on and so forth? It's because just like, all these countries, as I said to you, had their issues, even when, Britain, colonized. Let me just come back again. When Britain colonized the United States, the 4th of July situation between United States and the north and south of the United States, where you had the civil war between the north and south divide. We all know what that is, and we know who won. The North won, and the United States got independence, and they are where they are now. While the South was in support of British colonial rule to continue. And the North wanted to have their own way. And just like with Brexit, here's history repeating itself. Who are we to tell the people from the North, how dare you? You're so stupid. You're not smart. Why do you wanna Brexit out of the colonial masters of Britain? Why don't you follow your southern brothers and sisters and remain under colonial rule and be unified? Why do you want to come out? But then the northern wouldn't want to hear it. They would say, I don't care what you want to say. We want to rule our own destiny. And that's how you had the Civil War. So that's that situation. And everybody else around the world who had nothing to do with it, stay out of it and had no opinion on it. But then if you look at Canada, they're still part of the British Commonwealth, even though, so to speak. So there's that situation too. So how is this all tied in? Well, again, when I swoop back over to Switzerland, it's because all these countries have their issues and, colonial and World War I and II and all this back and forth, and they're all fighting each other every chance they get. And really, they're really trying their very best to put a lid on it and, be tolerant and be respectful to each other and do business with each other. And, each generation, it gets better and better. And they're all getting along, and that's fine. But the thing with Switzerland is not governed by under the EU. The EU's sort of headquarters is Brussels, which is in Belgium. Now, The reason why I'm mentioning all this to you is that if Britain leaves the EU, it doesn't mean we still can't trade with the European Union. It doesn't mean we still can't trade with all the other European countries throughout Europe. Of course we can, because we'll still be part of the EEA, which is the same thing with Switzerland and the same thing with Norway up here. You know, you can still trade, but you're a sovereign country. The difference between being in the EEA and being in the EU is when you're in the EU, you sign away your sovereignty, whilst if you're in the EEA, you still have your sovereignty like Switzerland has, but at the same time, Switzerland can trade within the EEA, the European Economic Area. So this is another thing that I'm sure a lot of my American brothers and sisters is not aware about, and if they do, they're keeping silent about it. So I'm here to educate those celebrities who half of the time, I'm not saying they all do, but a lot of them, they don't pick up a book and they don't care. And if it's not something to do within their immediate borders, they don't really care to know and they're not interested. But this is for those who want to know. And, you know, before you open your mouth and saying F Brexit and all this kind of stuff, you know, get the facts, understand the history, understand the complicated machine and how many different moving parts there are before you open your mouth and say something that embarrass yourself. So that's that. Now, the European Economic Community is basically made up of the EEA, you could say, and the EU. So Norway, Switzerland, and all these other countries that's not part of the EU is in the EEA. Now, here's another thing. Here's another caveat to stick in there, because I am going to go in, and you know, this video is going to be a bit long, but I'm really trying to rush and squeeze as much as I can in. So here's the next thing. Let me explain the difference between the EEA and the EU. In the EEA, as I say, you know, Switzerland is, and I'm using them as an example. They're their own sovereign country. They're fine. I'm not saying Britain is not a sovereign country, but technically on the surface, they're not. And I'll give you a good example. Let's say Britain decide that, you know, the British government say, well, you know, I'm going to put 20 billion pounds towards building new roads and building new hospitals and schools and so on or whatever. Let's say that's the budget and that sounds good. Because they're in the EU, they can't just do that. They have to go to Brussels. They might turn around and say, no, you don't. We suggest that you only put, 5 billion towards it. Now, Britain can kick and scream all they want. If Brussels says your budget to spend on schools and roads and hospitals is 5 billion, Britain can only spend that 5 billion. Now you can imagine how people in Britain, the citizens of Britain, is going to feel now to say, well, you know, we vote in this government and this government promised us new roads, new schools, new hospitals, new this, that and the third. And, you know, the money is earmarked to do all these great things. And then now that you're in power, you're telling us now that you ain't got the money. You only got you can only spend 5 grand. What's happened to the other you only can spend 5 billion. What happened to the other 15 billion that you promised? You know, well, I'm sorry, you know, we were overruled by Brussels, you know, EU. It's one of the prerequisites of being in the EU. We've got to follow the EU rules. That's what I mean when I say your sovereignty is eroded, because now someone else in another foreign country can technically dictate how you govern your own country and run your own country and how you spend your money and your budget in your own country. So that's another reason. So when you look at it from that respect, again, it's another reason for the right wings and the racists to jump on that bandwagon, because again, it just so happened to fit in with their agenda. So that's that situation. But if you look at Switzerland, for instance, they can say we're going to spend 20 billion in roads and schools and hospital, and there's nothing the EU can do, even though they're in the European Economic Area, the EEA. There's nothing that Europe can, you know, the European Union can say, no, you can't. They're going to say, yes, we can. We're not part of the EU. We're part of the EEA, which means we all agree to work and trade with each other and do stuff together. It's a bit like the Commonwealth sort of thing. But we're not part of the United Nations of Europe, so we're not bound by your laws and regulations to do it. But we will follow whatever laws and regulations within the EEA for trade. But how we spend our money, you can't tell us how to spend our money and how much budget we should have for X, Y, and Z. And that's the difference. So and Switzerland is a very good economy, so let's not get it twisted. But, you know, having said that, you know, that's what it is. So that's the second reason. And for that reason, a lot of people voted in favor of Brexit. But a lot of them are not really understanding that issue. You know, it not just affects how Britain spends money, it affects a lot of stuff to do with law, financial regulation. You know, I work in the financial industry, and I can tell you straight off, there's a lot of financial rules and regulations which is handed down through Europe that we have to follow even though you work within the banks and the banking sector within the UK. It's just what it is. It comes with it. You sign up. That's what you get when you sign up. So that's that bit. Now, here's the third angle I'm going to give you guys. Let's use Poland, and I'm not saying this because I'm have anything against Polish people. Very lovely people. I've met lots of Polish people. There are lots of them here in the UK. Very hardworking, very polite, very industrious people. I've got nothing bad to say about them. But I'm going to use them as an example here, just to illustrate a point that the racist and the right wing again is using, which is really no fault of the Polish people. It's not their fault, and it's really no fault of the companies they work for too. And this is how it goes. Imagine Polish people, their economy is not as good as the British economy. Remember that the pillar stones of financial hub is London, Paris, Hong Kong, New York, and so on. So those are the hubs. Anyone that's into finance and economy, those are the hubs, the stock markets, those are the stock exchange. Those are the leading hubs, cities. Okay. So now, increasingly China is coming up there too. But, traditionally over the years, it's been those cities, the other hubs. So the economy in Poland is nowhere near as good as the economy in Britain, especially in London. So now what's happening is people in Poland are sort of leaving because now they're thinking, well, for me to work in the UK or anywhere else in the European Union, I don't need a visa. I don't need a work permit. I don't need a right to reside and all this kind of stuff and permanent residence and green card as they use in America. I don't need none of those documents. Once my country is in the European Union, I can up and go into any of the 28 member states and live, work and do whatever I want to do. Like me right now, I can pack my family up and I can go to Poland, Germany, France, Italy, Spain. I can go anywhere, Sweden, Finland, Lithuania. I can go to any one of these countries and live and work and do everything, and I'll be completely legal. So, but the thing is, no one in Britain is leaving to go to these countries, but people from these poorer European Union countries are leaving and coming to Britain. So what you have is, and I don't blame the Polish people. Of course, you're going to go where the job opportunities are, where you can make money, because again, the strongest currency in Europe, you will argue, is the British sterling pound. So what's happening is here, someone from Poland in a weak economy with a weak currency travels across the border, and what the British are looking at is saying, well, you're not stopping in Germany, you're not going to Austria or Italy or Spain or France or any one of these countries, or you're not going up to Denmark or Sweden or Finland. You're making your way over to Britain. Why? You got to literally cross over the ocean to get to us. While these are mainland, you can just drive across any one of these countries and just do a checkout at the border. It's like driving from United States to Mexico. You just drive across, you go to a checkpoint and you drive over and you're done. So why do you have to go through that extra trouble? So they're going from here to Germany and then to France, because the reason why they take this route is because I was showing you on the map, but it's not there. There's sort of like a channel tunnel where you can take the underground train that goes under the ocean to cross over into London, into Europe, into Britain. Or you can take the ferry, which goes on the sea and sail across, and so those are the two ways of going across. So they're cutting to 2 or 3 countries in some cases or whatever. Maybe sometimes they go through Germany, then they go to Netherlands and Belgium, and then they take the way there, or they go whichever way they take it, they're going to at least 2 or 3 countries before they can make their way, depending on the path they take. So people in Britain is looking at it and thinking, well, why are you going to these other countries for opportunities? Why are you all coming to us? And it's not why you're all coming to us. And it's not just Poland, it's all the other weaker countries like Lithuania and all the other countries. And as I say, I'm not taking anything away from them. They're very nice people. But what you have to understand is they're doing the right thing. If the opportunity is there, if the United States join the EU and for some miraculous, strange reason, the United States was part of the EU, where do you think everybody in Europe will be going? You think they'll be coming to Britain anymore? No. I think they will all be jumping on ships and jumping on planes, and they'll be coming over here. And then you're the ones who are going to be crying. But you can't blame them, because once you sign up, and that's what it is, they can come over. They don't need visa. They don't need work permit. They don't need nothing. They can just land and show their passport. And you're welcome. You can come in, bring your family. You can set up shop and do whatever you want to do. So that's what's happening with Britain. And it's been a running situation going on with that issue. So I don't blame them at all. And the reason why they're coming is, the reason why this is an issue as well with the British is because the other key point I want to make is the employment sector is majority the private sector that employs people. So now what you have is you have a British person who work for a minimum wage. Let's say, for example, they get, I don't know, let's say they get £20 an hour to work, okay? And £20 an hour to work, and the typical small or medium businessman has to pay £20 an hour for his typical English British person to work, because their lifestyle is slightly higher, or more, slightly higher than those in the poorer European countries or European member state countries. So now this man over here that's running his job thinking, okay, I got to pay this British person £20 an hour. Here comes this Polish man that's got the right to work, reside, live and everything. He just comes and land, and now he's willing to work. Remember now, the British sterling pounds is worth more than the Polish currency. I'm not sure what that is, but so if he comes over and he says, well, I'll work for £5 an hour. £5 an hour is still good money. He's saving himself £15 per an hour. So who do you think he's going to employ? The British person here that is paying £20 an hour of minimum wage, or the person here that's willing to work for £5 an hour, which is, less than half. He's saving himself £15 an hour. That's crazy. He's going to employ the Polish man. The Polish man is also winning, because when he gets this money, when he takes this British sterling pounds back over into Poland, he's lit. He's living good. He's now considered, middle class or affluent, working back in his country. He'll be able to build a nice house and have all the nice trappings that he has, just because he's working cheap labor over here. And that's the situation. So now the British person can't compete, and he's not going to go to Poland for a job, because that's a waste of time for him. And he's not going to go to many of these other countries either, because that's a waste of time for him. He's going to stay right here. But then all these other poorer countries are coming in and flooding in to get the jobs, and the business people that's employing are taking them on. It's a bit like you see in America, where you have these Mexicans that come across the border to work day jobs, and they stand around and wait for the van to come and pick them up early in the morning, and they all jump in the van and they go and work. And it's an American farmer that's employing all these Mexican illegal workers, where there's no contract, there's no nothing. They just pay them whatever they pay them for the day, and they let them go, and they have no insurance, no liability or nothing. So that's the situation, and they're easily dispensable. They're a dime a dozen. And that's not disrespectful to Mexican people at all. They're very, hardworking, nice people. But I'm just trying to explain to you how business works. So it's not a racial thing. It's business opportunity. So for the Polish people in this context, they're taking a business opportunity, and they're well within their rights to come across the border and earn a living and provide for their family. And for the British person or entrepreneur who's running a business, he's going to try and save money wherever way he can. So he's going to be in his right to say, well, why should this thing cost me £20 an hour when I can get it for £5 an hour? Duh, that's a no-brainer. It's the same thing. It's economics. So so both these people are doing what's within their right to do. But all this is to the detriment of the British people at large. So this is the third way where it's not benefiting us. Okay, so the money bit doesn't work out. And then in terms of the cross-border movements, it's not working out, and it's not working out for the job opportunities that's working out. So that's threefold. Here's another angle. Now, again, what you have to realize is all these poorer countries, if Britain said they want to leave Brexit, you think Poland wants them to go, because now once they go, Poland and Lithuania and all these other, Greece and all these other countries which has got not as good as and as stable as an economy, they're like, well, where are we going to go if Britain comes out of the EU? Now we're going to have to apply for a visa and get work permit and go through all that bureaucracy and blah blah blah, which is going to be more difficult for them. So they don't want Britain to leave. So they're going to be, in terms of the politicians now, we're not talking about the citizens now. In terms of the politicians and the business people, they're going to go around the world saying, oh, Britain is stupid to leave, and X, Y, and Z, and why they're leaving. They're stupid, they're not smart, they should stay, and be strong. But then it's not benefiting us, it's benefiting everybody else except us. So everything we've discussed so far, everyone else is being benefited except Britain and the British people. So there is, but at no point am I putting any racial tone on it. The racist right wings are doing so, but it just so happened that this thing plays into their hands, to their agenda. I'm looking at all of this purely from the figures and history and so on, and the dynamics and the complexities and how it pans out. You have to look at things to realize that this is all an iceberg effect. It's the 25% you see above the water. There's another 75% below the water that you don't understand, and a lot of people don't even care or even business to look at. And that's what I'm here to do this video, to highlight to you. So there's that. Here's the next kicker. The third reason why people don't want Britain to come out of Brexit is because of the European Union as a bloc, as opposed to dealing with several countries. And here is another one. Let's swing back over to America. My good American brothers and sisters, you know how it goes. You can take it. Let's use them as an example. And let's use, who's the most popular corporation right now? Let me see. Apple. Let's use Apple. Billion or trillion dollar company. Let's use them. Okay. So Apple now, you know, they jump in a plane and, you know, first class, and they fly all the way over to Europe, and they say, you know, this is a rich market for the pickings here. We got Spain, France, Italy, you know, Poland. We've got so many countries here, Portugal, you know, Sweden, Finland, Lithuania, Italy. Wow, we can set up shop and we can sell to these people and we can make billions. But here's the thing, without no European Union, you'd have to go to each of these countries separately and make a deal. So here is Switzerland. So they have to go to Switzerland and say, well, you know, we'd like to set up a, you know, Apple store and headquarters and this, that, and the third, and factory and assembly unit and whatever it is. And, you know, they'll have to deal with Switzerland, or whatever deal they make with Switzerland is going to be different to the deal that they make in, you know, in the rest of the European bloc. Like, for instance, what they make in France and so on. So if all these countries were their own separate sovereign countries, now technically they are, but technically they're not in terms of politics and rules and regulations and law. So now what will happen is Apple as a country would have to go to each of these countries separately to strike deals with them and go through all that bureaucracy and red tape. That's a headache for a corporation, trust me. That's a headache. They don't want that headache. Now, wouldn't it be better if they can just go to Brussels? Because you've got all these 28 countries in the European Union, and they can just go to, you know, Brussels and deal with Brussels, one central entity. Once that one central entity give them what they want and they get the green light and they get the contract, they can then set up shop all over in any European Union country, member state. So they can go into Britain, France, Spain, Portugal, Poland, you know, Sweden, Finland, and Lithuania, and so on and so forth, and all the other ones, and set up shop, because, you know, they've got the green light from Brussels. And they're all signed up as a signatory and a legal member state, which is bound by under EU law. So it's easier for corporations. So the point I'm trying to make to you here is they will also be the people that you possibly, I'm not saying they do, but you possibly see these big CEOs and big billionaires and millionaires who have their own interests. They would also want Britain to stay in the EU, because remember, Britain is a financial hub. Let's not forget that. So it's a situation where, you know, if we're using United States as one example, but this applies to all countries internationally, you know, they're all going to be singing the same song sheet. So you're going to have the right-wing racists pushing their agenda, why Britain should leave. But then on the other hand, you know, which doesn't look good for Britain, because it's like, yeah, you got these racist right-wings that's pushing the cause of Brexit, which is tarnishing our reputation. And the best example I make, as I say, is like, you know, if you're going for a march, you let's say you're demonstrating against something and you organize a peaceful march. And then when you go for that peaceful march, all of a sudden you see all these thugs and hooligans come along to hijack your peaceful march, and they're burning and smashing up windows and looting shops and doing all this kind of stuff. They're not there for the cause. They're there to get lit and to turn up and to cause trouble and do selfies of what they're doing so they can post it on social media. That's what they're there for. But they're not there for the real reason, you know, to demonstrate against a cause. And it's the same thing. The right-wing extremists and racists, they're not there for the same reasons that I'm outlining. They're there for their own racist agenda and for their own prejudice or insecurities. That's what they're there for. But then they've hijacked the whole Brexit situation. So internationally, Britain is seen like, oh, you're being represented by these hooligans and these racists and prejudiced people who right-wings who want Brexit. So that doesn't look good for us. But then no one is stopping to question and say, no, there's a deeper reason than that. These are the rationales behind it. They're the ones that's hopped onto our bandwagon and hijacked our cause. Not when I say our, I'm speaking figuratively now, not me personally, Because as I say, I wasn't really for or against Brexit. But once I did the research and I looked into everything, I realized, you know what, it does make sense for us to leave. But it's based on the information that I'm now sharing with you guys. Okay, so you have the corporations and I'm using Apple as an example. I'm not saying Apple is advocating that Britain stay in the EU, blah, 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 but I'm just using them as an example to say, technically, in terms of an example, a big corporation, a multi-million or multi-billion corporation, even though they're an international entity or an entity in another country, that's got nothing to do with Europe or the EU or what's going on over here. It's not affecting their lives. It's not affecting their families. But they want to have a say. And the reason why is because it's easier for them to deal with Europe as a bloc. And Britain is one of the, very economy in terms of consumer spending. So, Apple, for instance, is a very consumer product, which is expensive. So they're not going to sell as many phones in Poland and places like that they would sell in London. Do you understand me? Or in Britain. That's just the facts of it. The big markets are going to be Germany, France, London. I'm not saying Spain and over that, but the big markets are going to be these places. These are the countries, the poorer countries. They want their iPhones too, but then the average Joe Blog would have to travel and go to countries like the United Kingdom to work and get that money, so then they can go get their iPhone. They probably buy the iPhones while they're here. But I'm just using this as an example to show you how corporate interest, for them, they want Britain to stay in the EU because it serves their personal agenda. Then you have the poorer countries and the poorer economies. They want Britain to join the economy, to stay within the European Union, because it benefits their cause and it benefits them personally. So everybody is benefiting out of this, except the British people so far. And even with the figures I've shown you, that's also compacting on top of that to show you that it's just not working for Britain. Let's take another fifth example. I think it's fifth. Another example. This time I'm not going to use America. I've used America quite enough time, even though it's the Americans that is very vociferous on this matter. Let me use Canada this time, just to be fair. And this is purely examples and technicalities, okay? But a lot of what I'm saying to you is facts, okay? Now, let's take Canada as an example. Let's say we have a situation again where Canada wants to set up military bases. Never thought of that one, did you? Okay. Let's say Canada wants to set up military bases in all these different countries, in Poland, Germany, Belgium, France, Italy, Spain, and Finland, Sweden. They would have to go to each of these countries separately and negotiate and hammer out a deal and lobby them and backwards and forwards a few times and jump through a few red tape and bureaucracy to get those military bases set up. But let's say now, all those countries are within the European Union. So now all they have to do is just run to Brussels. Where's Brussels? It's in Belgium, isn't it? So why isn't it showing up? Yeah, there we go, Brussels. So let's say they run to Brussels now. And, technically, I'm not saying this is what happened in reality. I'm just saying technically this could happen. Technically, this could happen. Where they run to Brussels and they say, we want to set up military bases in the European Union, in the European bloc. They couldn't go to Switzerland and say that, because Switzerland is not in the European Union, even though they're in the European Economic Area, because they're a sovereign country. They're different. What goes on those other countries doesn't affect them, and vice versa. So they could go to Brussels and say, listen, I want to set up 10 military bases in European Union. And let's say there's a lot of back and forth and lobbying and debating and argument and back and forth and what's in it for us and blah, blah, blah. And they did that, and this went on for quite some time. And eventually they settled down and said, right, yes, you can get your military bases set up in the European Union. They can then turn on and say, well, okay, the 10 military bases we have, we want to put 9 of them in Britain and 1 in France. Let's say, for instance, Britain turn on and say, hang on a second, you got 2 military bases here. I'm not saying purely by example. I'm not saying Canada has 2 military bases or any military bases for that matter in the UK. As I say, this is purely hypothetical, but it's technical information I'm giving you. Like on a technical level, this could happen. I'm not saying it does happen or it is happening, but it could technically be a case to look into. Potential. So then Britain would say, well, why are you putting 9 military bases in my country and only 1 in France? Why can't you spread your military bases throughout the rest of the European Union? Why do you have to lump them all in my country? They say, well, that's where we want it. You're the most strategic location because, I don't know, we don't like Norway and, we want to keep an eye on Norway. So actually, we might put 5 in your country and 5 in Sweden, so we can kind of surround them kind of thing, or maybe, one in Denmark and so on, because they're in the European Union too. But the point I'm trying to make to you is Britain will then say, well, no, we don't agree with that, whatever. Technically, Canada would say, well, you need to go to your masters and talk to them, because I've got the green light. I've got all the paperwork and documents that give me the authorization and the contract. So I'm building it anyway. Tough luck. Where can you clear out some land for me so I can start building? I'm laughing and making it light. But as I say, I could be off the mark, but I'm just looking at it. Maybe it's that other third eye of me looking. I don't know. But anyway, let's say all that's the case now. And then Britain would have to go to Brussels and put their case and say, kicking and screaming, why they putting the bases here? Why do you agree to it? Blah, 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 blah. And, try and work something out. But Britain couldn't do what Switzerland would do and say, like, well, listen, we don't want you to put any military bases in our country because we get along with France. And if you're trying to surround France, we don't want to have bad relations with France. So you sticking a base here would cause problems between you. It's all right for you. Canada is all the way over there. All the way over here across the ocean, you're safe over there. But when the war kicks off, it's going to kick off right in my backyard. So there's no way I want a situation where, we are back and forth because of your base while you're all the way over here safe, Jack. It's all right for you. So no, we don't want it. We don't want to provoke our neighbors. So therefore, because we don't want to provoke our neighbors, we're not going to give the go-ahead. But if you're in the European Union and they give you the go-ahead, then love it or lump it, they can stick the bases wherever they want. Technically, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying technically, that could be a situation. So that's the next situation to look at. So hopefully, with all this information, I've given you some, sort of different angles to look at and why in all these situations it affects Britain. Now you might say, well, why didn't your government look at all these different analytics and stay out? But remember, we went in initially back in 1973 because the economy of Britain was in decline at the time. Now, I also mentioned to you that, in terms of the weaker, poorer countries in the EU, they want us to join. And then once we join, they were jumping up for joy because now they can run across. But they don't want us to leave now. Why should they leave when they can have their cake and eat it too? So they don't want us to leave, even no matter how much we're suffering. And it's killing us. It's like, well, bear the pain because, we don't want to bear our own pain. So, you bear the pain and make us come up and get lit and, and make us get our swag on. And, I know your own people are suffering and your country is suffering and per person you're suffering. But I overlook all of that because, we want to drive the Mercedes Benz too. We want to be lit too and whatever. So, I know I'm making light of the whole situation, but I'm just showing you there's a lot of selfish reasons behind it. Then you have the politicians and you have the corporations who dealing with an entity in one block is better than dealing with separate countries. It's too much headache, too much bureaucracy. And quite frankly, the more countries join the EU is the happier international countries will be. Because then if Norway join, if Switzerland join, if the Ukraine and all these other countries join, then they have all this playground here to play with. Whereas I'm sure they see Switzerland as a kind of well, why couldn't you just, sign up and just be a part of it? Why do you, Switzerland, had to be different? Why couldn't you, there's Switzerland. Why couldn't you be there? I mean, Italy is, France is, Spain is, Germany is, Czech Republic is, Austria is, Poland is. So why are you in the middle? What's so special about you? Why didn't you join the European Union? And if the Switzerland want, they can, as I say. If Switzerland wants to join the European Union today, they could. They would pass the criteria hands down. But they don't want to join. They're smart. They're staying out. And their economy is doing just quite right. Thank you very much. So these are the different types of things you have to look at. And once you look at these, you realize that on every aspect I've just outlined to you, I'm not being biased. I'm going by the history. I'm going by the dynamics. I'm going by the issues with the region. This is why I went all over the place at first. Out of the chaos, there's calm. Trust me. There's, as they say, what's that term? The chaotic theory or theorem. I forgot it. But anyway, out of all that chaos, there's calm, trust me. So all of it goes to show you that when you look at the bigger picture, is that iceberg effect. A lot of people don't see the other dynamics and moving parts. They see who we're being represented by, which is the racist right wing, and they think, oh, that doesn't look good for Britain. Are those the people that are speaking up for Brexit? They're a bunch of idiots. Britain is stupid. They don't know what they're doing. But then, and at the same time, you're hearing other, European countries saying, why are you leaving Brexit? Why is there a Brexit? Why is there Europe? You should stay, X, Y, Z. And then at the same time, you have governments and corporations also saying you should stay because they have vested interest in it too. But everybody's got vested interest in it except Britain. And when you look at all those factors combined, this is why I say personally, Britain should leave the European Union. But it doesn't mean we can't get on with our neighbours, we can't respect each other and tolerate each other. It doesn't mean we still can't trade with each other, because Switzerland is doing it and Norway is doing it. And they're doing quite well. The economy is quite good. So you can do it. You can still be part of the EEA and not be a part of the EU. There's many other countries. I don't think Romania is in the EU. It might be down to their economic situation, but let me look at Romania. Yeah, Romania actually is. Portugal. So a lot of the sort of weaker countries are in the European Union. So then Hungary is in there, I think. Slovakia, I don't think they are in there. Let me just double check. Slovakia. Yeah, they are. Oh my goodness. Slovakia and Slovenia are in there. So what this is telling you is that a lot of these other weaker countries are benefiting tremendously from being in the EU. Germany, France, Spain, which are the bigger giants, the bigger powerhouse economic giants, they're taking the loss for the team. But Britain is at the bottom of the scale, and they got the worst deal of everybody. Out of all the 28 member state countries, Britain has the worst deal. And I've just showed you the figures. I'm not making stuff up. I got all my information from the European Commission and from the Office of National Statistics, which is the UK government's website. Mind you, a lot of the information you get from here is sketchy, because the European Commission give you their information in euros. And the British government is giving you their information in pounds. The informations are wishy-washy. Sometimes the figures are different. There's so many different dynamics going on. But all in all I can say is I want to end it there. I mean, this is going on for some, I don't know, hour and 25 minutes, hour and 26 minutes. I think I'll end it there. I did tell you it was going to be a very long video. But this is a short, I could put everything in as quick as possible. So I'm just thinking whilst I'm here, what else do I leave out? What else do I need to say? Nothing else really. So with that, I'm just going to end it there. Thank you.